Hello and welcome to Legally Speaking with me, Tarun Nangia. In a final and concluding episode in the Up Close and Personal series with Mr. Raian Karanjawala, today we'll discussing the sequence of events that happened from the late 90s to 2018 today and how he has witnessed them. We'll also take his comments on the field of law, the legal fraternity in general. Thank you so much, Mr. Karanjawala, for sparing your time for the third part of the Up Close and Personal series. We discussed up to the early 90s in our part 2, and I would like you to discuss more about the field in general. What was running a law firm like in the 90s, and what is running a law firm in 2018 today? What differences do you see in India and the work of a lawyer?
A to Z. In the sense that in running a law firm,
yes.
A to Z. When we started,
yes.
we were basically, as I said earlier in my earlier episode, a mom and pop store.
Yes.
The two of us, then we took a junior, we took another junior, we had clerks and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Today, running a law firm of a certain size and dimension
yes.
requires a lot of skills. Today we've hired out consultants who come in and, because mine was a homegrown experience.
Yes.
I didn't really work in any other company for a long enough time to get all their skill sets.
Yes.
For example, I was with Praveen Parekh for about 2 to 3 years. That's not enough to get the whole background into your own system. So today, for example, when we run a law firm, we've got almost 100 lawyers or so on. So what we have to do is, you have an HR which has to come in and handle things. You have huge accounting departments which have to look at everything. You have a lot of compliance issues are there. In addition to that, you have to be abreast of what is happening in the law, which is the changing field, where are you likely to adapt if you want to survive, and so on. We are, of course, ourselves only a litigation firm. So we have to sort of just focus on that aspect of law. But it's completely different. For example, we hire out, we sort of consult people who, there's a woman called Bitika Anand, we consult her on what are we doing wrong, what should we be doing right. She suggests things, look, your partner, associate, this thing is not quite matching, there are too many associates to too few partners and so on, and all these things.
I get a sense it's almost running like a company. You're running a company.
Well, it's you're running now a large organization.
Yes.
If you run a large organization, then after some time, it can't just be your own thought on what should happen. It has to be sort of set. Yeah, you have to sort of have set guidelines, set rules. People have to have an understanding.
One thing that the whole industry and a lot of young lawyers who would be watching this interview would want to know, that now you do work for so many corporates, be it the Tatas or so many other groups. And what is the most important element? Because I get this feeling that they say trust. Is that the most important thing when you have to work for 3 or 4 decades? Is trust very important in a lawyer's career? What is
Absolutely.
the key?
Has to be. After all, doctors and lawyers,
yes.
people come to you when they're in trouble.
Yes.
Now, before they can open up, before they can sort of talk to you, before they can share, they have to feel
yes.
that sitting across the table,
yes.
the advice that you're giving them
yes.
will be in their benefit and not yours.
Yes.
You see, for example, if you're known as a lawyer who just wants to multiply cases
yes.
so that he earns more and more because
yes.
he's got his client enmeshed in 15 different litigations before the client could get up in the morning, then over a period of time, those lawyers don't survive because people see through you. Clients today, just as the law is a far more educated place,
yes.
clients themselves are far more educated today. They have a far better understanding of whether you're really good for them or not. So, of course, trust is important.
And you also take a certain pride in representing the groups you do, because, for example, if you say the Tata Group comes with a legacy of 150 years, do you take...
Obviously, a big group
yes.
which has a good reputation.
Yes.
If you have that on your client roster,
yes.
it can't harm you, surely. I mean, obviously, it's to your advantage. I mean, how do people go to lawyers? Why do people go to lawyers? Essentially, there's only one reason. There's only one fundamental way in which you get work.
Yes.
It's word of mouth.
Word of mouth.
Yeah, it's word of mouth. Nobody goes to a lawyer or a doctor blind. You don't pick out 5 names in the hat and pick out one and say, "Chalo, aaj main wahan jaunga." It doesn't work like that. Whoever you're going to, whether you're going to a lawyer or you're going to a doctor, you're going to ask around people who, first you're going to ask around, who knows this lawyer? Oh, you do. Okay, what is your experience of him? How has he done? Or you'll read up. If he's written about, you'll read up about him in the law magazines or the law journals and so on. So, first of all, clientele comes word of mouth.
Yes.
And obviously, it also comes by way of reference. Now, if you say, look, I have Tatas as my client, or people realize that, okay, the Tatas come to you, then they say, well, look, the Tatas are not easily going to go to a lawyer who's sort of
Yes.
up to no good. So then they'll feel more comfortable coming to you than if you could only pull out the neighbor next door as your client.
Yes.
That's it.
I'll now take you to the millennium years. In 2000, 2001, we discussed in the 90s about India's satellite TV revolution. Now I will get to the telecom revolution. And in the telecom revolution, you got involved in the Cellular Operators of India case.
I got involved in what is called the WLL case.
The wireless and local
the
loop.
telecom revolution was already entrenched. The telecom space was already covered. People had come. There was an initial telecom litigation in which I was not part, where people who paid a large license fee then shifted onto a revenue sharing regime because the government also came to a particular conclusion that the license fee was a little more exorbitant than they could afford and they wouldn't be able to develop themselves if they had stuck to that regimen. So they changed and they became a revenue sharing regimen. Somewhere in the year 2000, 2001, they introduced what was called a wireless in local loop, which was a sort of a side technology by which, according to the cellular operators, another operator was now coming into the
field market.
To the market. That time, again, I was briefed on behalf of the cellular operator organization. So there were, which were largely consisting of people like Sunil and Sunil Mittal, Airtel, Vodafone, Ashim Ghosh was there at that time, and BPL, Rajiv Chandrasekhar was there.
Achha.
So we represented, along with a battery of other lawyers, the cellular operators. Again, in that time, the people who appeared for us were Chidambaram, Gulam, Iqbal Chagla, a whole host of people.
And see, one question that a lot of people would want to know from you, since you've been running a law firm now for this long, what kind of law firms do you see will survive in future? There is a lot of articles written about the rise of the specialist law firm. By 2050, you'll have only people specializing in A or B or C. Do you agree with that kind of a prophecy, or do you feel no, the general all-purpose law firm has...
Broadly, I agree.
You do?
See, what will happen is, even the all-purpose law firm will really be a conglomerate or an aggregation of boutique law firms.
Okay.
So what you will find is this. What is happening today is, the way practices are evolving, you will find increasingly that there is a lot of special... For example, the IPR practice is already largely captured by firms which are almost purely IPR, or a large firm which has a very large IPR division. You see, so therefore, there is definitely a move towards a specialized legal practice. There is no doubt about it, because you will see that even the big law firm, even in America today, when you go to a particular firm, suppose you're going to Kravitz, Swain, or you go to anybody, when you go with a particular kind of work, you will be taken to a particular partner in a particular department who does that. You may know partner X, but if he's not doing that kind of work, he'll send you to partner Y who is. So already, even in the big law firms, both in India and abroad, there is a move towards specialization.
So you will
and
say
that's
the
inevitable.
law has grown so
naturally, because the amount of cases that have grown. I mean, I remember somebody telling me that Jamshedji Kanga, when he was practicing in the 50s and late 50s, in the whole case law was in, say, 2 large volumes. I mean, 2 large cupboards, Indian appeals, and that's it. You knew that, you knew. Today, I mean, you can fill a library with the amount of cases that have just sprung all over. And every field has a specialized flavor to it.
Now, I would like to ask you a question that the Prime Minister of India raised. He has said that he wants to make India as a center of arbitration. And increasingly, Indian corporates have been complaining that a lot of foreign companies want to come to India, do business here, earn revenue from here, but they want to go and do arbitration in Singapore, SIAC or London. The Prime Minister has, been vocal about it. A bill is pending in Parliament of setting up the Delhi International Arbitration Centre.
I thought it just got inaugurated the other day, didn't it?
There is one more bill which is pending. Of course, there is an arbitration center which got inaugurated. Could you share with us a couple of things that India can do so that even arbitration picks up in India? As in, you could do arbitration in Delhi or Bombay, and companies would want to come and do arbitration.
See, essentially, if you have a strong bench strength of good arbitrators, and you combine that with a system by which the arbitrations actually from A to Z, from the beginning to the closure, get fast-tracked, then arbitrations will pick up in India. So if you just have a quick system where already and changes have already been made, you have to finish off an arbitration in 1 year and so on and so forth. With all those changes, as long as you have a good bench strength of good arbitrators, you're bound to have a situation where more and more arbitrations start happening in India.
So you see that growing in the future with the infrastructure.
Definitely.
I'll now take you to the mid-2000s, and you appeared in the Bombay mill land matter, because they say that mills in Bombay were operating right in the heart of the city.
What essentially happened was that the mills in Bombay, from my recollection, the mills in Bombay were operating in the heart of the city, because in the days when the mills were made, that was not the heart of the city. The heart of the city was several. The mills were 100 years old, 90 years old, 75 years old.
So then they were outside?
Yeah, they were in the outskirts of the city. Nobody when he starts a mill is going to start in the heart of what is then a city. So in those days, the city was South Bombay, one little part of it, and all the mills were near Parel and so on. A lot of the mills were in that area. So that was the mill area. So it was not the heart of the city at that point of time. It's just that the city changed. Two things happened. The city changed, so it then became in the center of the city. And the mill owners, because of a variety of reasons, were no longer doing so well. So a lot of them wanted to close their mills down and do something else with their land. The government came out with a particular proposal which simply said that yes, you can convert this land into this usage, this usage, this usage, which is different from mill land usage. But in order to do so, you will have to surrender so much of your land. The whole dispute was, how much of the land is to be surrendered? The question was of the interpretation, how much are you actually to surrender? So a PIL was filed in Bombay. Iqbal Chagla appeared. And he said, look, no, you don't have to surrender X percentage, you have to surrender much more. Obviously, the mill owners went to court and said, sorry, we have to surrender much less. Why else would they? We lost in the Bombay High Court and we won in the Supreme Court. That's it. That is essentially what happened. But because of that, and because of that change in the legislature, and because of the change of statute, a lot of mill lands were opened up. See, activity which could only be mill lands and which was fairly useless, then became commercial activity. You could have supermarkets there and so on, and that is why today the character of Parel has changed.
Now, since we are speaking of mill cases and commercial cases, there is a huge demand from certain sections to allow foreign law firms into India. Now, as somebody who's been running a law firm for so long...
my view?
Your view, your own view.
I'm against it. Why am I against it? I'll tell you. I'll give you a fundamental reason. I remember Henry Kravis met me at one of the, I think it was at Anilji's house over dinner or something, and he sort of brought up this question with me. He said, are you for the foreign law firms coming in or are you against it? I said, I'm against it. He said, why? I said, because if you have a monopoly, why would you want to lose it? And he just said, I can't argue with that. Now, but behind the joke, there's a serious thing. You have to remember one thing, that today, frankly, the Indian legal profession is seeing its bonus years. But it is still not entrenched or established. People are still finding it difficult to form big firms and so on and so forth. It's not an easy thing. Life is still tough for a lot of lawyers. The minute you open up for competition, what you're going to suddenly find is a lot of foreign firms come in. A lot of the indigenous firms will just be wiped out. Like something like what happened when the Big Four came for the chartered accountancy practice. How many Indian chartered accountants are there? You're just hearing the Big Four names, Ernst & Young, PricewaterhouseCoopers, so and so. They get involved in big scandals. It's all right. No, nobody talks about it. The Big Four remain the Big Four. They've grabbed all the work. A lot of the money goes abroad. For example, prior to their split, and even today perhaps, Amachal Mangaldas, according to me, was the one really big, and maybe Khaitans, was the one really big multinational Indian firm, law firm. Had the foreigners been allowed to come in 30 years back, I don't think they would have ever been able to rise to the level they do.
Yes.
And I'll give you another thing which I find which will hurt us. It's very simple. The practice of arbitration. Just look at the simple practice of arbitration. Today, as the practice of arbitration grows in India, more and more Indian lawyers get involved in the practice of arbitration, more and more junior counsels get briefed. There's more wealth which is created, which is kept within the Indian legal system.
Yes.
Once the foreign law firms come in, not in the first year, not in the second year, but you will suddenly find that there will be what is called the fly-in, fly-out culture.
Yes.
So a lawyer may not come from London because that's quite a flight, but you will have people just flying in from Hong Kong, from Singapore and Dubai. Dubai is 3 hours away.
Yes.
You just, I mean, you can come in the evening flight, attend the arbitration next morning, finish it in the evening, take the evening flight out. So what you will suddenly find is these foreign firms which are entrenched over here will encourage this fly-in, fly-out culture to happen in arbitration. In the law courts, they won't be allowed to practice, but in arbitration they will. And suddenly you'll start finding a whole group of people flying in, flying out, flying in, flying out, handling Indian arbitrations, and the Indian arbitration bench strength or lawyer strength that could have been built up won't be built up.
So you say local industrial, you're saying local legal, what you can say, firms should grow to that strength. Say
absolutely
5,000 lawyers or 10,000 lawyers.
Yeah,
before we
maybe not 5,000 lawyers, but certainly you should be 2,000-3,000 lawyers have the sufficient strength to withstand a multinational
so
coming
you mean
in.
like we have our local homegrown industries, we need local big law firms.
I think so. I think so. And I don't see the sudden reason. These are one of the few, these 5, 10, 15 years are the, as I call them, the bonus years for lawyers.
Yes.
After that, things will peter out. Things will come to a particular, everybody will it'll become all democratized.
Yes.
So these are the bonus years. Why should the Indian lawyer not take advantage of it? Why would you want to open it out to people who've been sitting in Dubai and Hong Kong and Singapore?
We should wait before others can cannibalize. We should first grow our strength.
Yeah,
otherwise,
absolutely.
others will cannibalize the market.
Absolutely. Why are they coming in today? They're only coming in because they have less work there and they can undercut. And they have the ability to come and undercut you. Yes. They'll come undercut you for 2 years, 3 years. Your client will leave them. Then they slowly get hold of your client and then service them.
That's a very interesting.
And they have a back-end ability to service. The question is here, they send it somewhere in Dubai, 15 people work on it, back-end it, send it back.
Yes. Interesting comment from Mr. Karanjawala. We'll continue this conversation with him, but we'll take a short break at this juncture and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Just before the break, we had Mr. Karanjawala giving his very frank opinion on why he thinks that the foreign law firms should not be allowed into India just yet. He says maybe after 5, 10, 15 years, but not now. Am I right, Mr. Karanjawala?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying 5, 10, 15 years from now. I don't know the exact time. But until the Indian law firms are in a position to match the foreign law firms, I don't think you should open up the industry and just crush the legal profession just as it's about to grow.
Okay, don't crush it. Now, I'll take you back to the growth years of your own law firm also between 2000 2010. There are 3 matters which you appeared, which some of them are not as important commercially, but important from the point of view of history. For example, Jinnah House is a much celebrated, what you can say.
That was being fought in Bombay, yes. So my firm was assisting over there.
And also the Karishma Kapoor, it was
That is just.
And one case which I remember, which was all over the newspapers and the pink papers, was the Birla Lodha fight for the property. Lodha was a chartered accountant.
I appeared at in a minuscule part of that litigation in the Supreme Court against the Lodhas, yes, where we succeeded.
Okay. And now before I discuss your cases, there's one more thing that I want to ask you. A lot of lawyers who currently watch you and who may be aspiring to open up their own law firms, because there is still time where Indians can. What would be your advice of them? 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you would want to give somebody who's watching it today and aspiring to open his own law firm?
Let me not advise the guy who's opening his own law firm. Let me first by advising the person who's just finished law, yes, and is wanting to join the profession.
Yes.
What is my advice to him?
Yes.
Essentially, there are 2, 3 advices. obviously you have to see your own circumstance, how well off you are, how much you can. But I think when you join the profession, the thing that you should look for is, where will I be busy? Go to the place where you will have the most work. Don't go to the place which will have the best air conditioning. Don't go to the firm which will pay you much more. Money is important, then you take that call, but then you might as well join a company. Go to the place where you will matter, where you will contribute, where you will not just be a small cog in a big wheel.
Yes.
Go, because only by doing a lot of work can you learn the law. The law, I remember Rajiv Dhawan telling me this once. He said, Raian, the law is always learned in the profession. It's not in the textbooks of law college. It's only when it's day to day that you learn the law. So if you don't go to a place which keeps you busy from beginning to end, you'll suffer. That's why I always say that my best learning years were in Praveen Parekh, because he was so busy, he gave us opportunity, and that's how we grew. If we hadn't had his training, we wouldn't be where we are today. That's the first advice I give. Second thing is just a little more personal. I picked it up from Kapil Sibal. You know, and this is, and a little from Salve. I remember Soli also telling me about this. You see, the point is, when you're advising a client, you must always advise him fairly. But don't spend all your time only finding the negative faults of his case. Arey, but the judge will say this. Arey, but what is your answer to that? Arey, but you have a case, you take it, you do your best with it. A little bit of, see, a client is a bit like a patient. He doesn't really want to go to a doctor who's only throwing darkness where he's looking for light. Yes. He wants a little bit of optimism. And this is what I learned from Kapil. You know, we used to go in cases to Kapil and I said, yeah, no problem, don't worry, we'll do something, we'll do something. And sure enough, 8 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, something happened. Something was done. If you keep being negative about your own case, you don't really get as far as you should.
That's a very important piece of advice for young lawyers from Mr. Karanjawala. Now, since we are running out of time, in 30 seconds, what was the great learning in these two cases? You represented Kareem Morani in the 2G case, your firm that is. And also, right to privacy has been now discussed every day in the newspapers and the cases going on in Supreme Court.
There was no great learning. It was just two well-known cases which we did.
Yes.
I appeared for Kareem in the 2G.
And Ratan Tata
my firm appeared. And Ratan Tata I appeared for in the privacy case.
Privacy case. And privacy you did much long before 2000 and now it's all over the courts because of course that issue.
Privacy, I think the case was filed in 2010, 2011.
Yes. But now you can see that this, in the social sphere, it's being discussed much more. Now, my final question to you this evening would be, you spent 4+ decades and you're running a law firm for that long. You've represented the best and the brightest, but what gives you a kick now in the profession and what do you aspire to do in future?
What does our profession give us? Forget me personally. According to me, as a litigator, the profession gives us the following things. A, it gives you, if you're successful, a fair amount of financial stability.
Yes.
2, it gives us a sense of independence. Litigators just tend to walk tall.
Yes.
We walk our own paths. We're not so subservient to the whole system. 3, it gives you the ability to interact with very interesting people.
Yes.
You meet people from all walks of life which you wouldn't normally have met. And maybe as a doctor you would have met them, but then you're meeting them at their worst, so they're not really going to spend time with you talking about the world because they're just worrying about what's happening to them. So you get a profile, you get a network, you get the ability to interact with some of the most interesting people. And that, I think, is a very fulsome life.
That is what you feel. On that note, I would like to end our third and concluding episode of Up Close and Personal with Mr. Raian Karanjawala. And Mr. Karanjawala, it has been a pleasure talking to you and, of course, a learning and a learning for a lot of people and a lot of young lawyers who's going to watch this episode. Thank you so much.
It was great fun talking to you.
Thank you so much, Phil. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, viewers, for joining us on this episode of Legally Speaking, in the final and the concluding episode of Up Close and Personal with Mr. Raian Karanjawala. Thank you.